Let's talk about how to visit Iceland while there's an active volcano erupting. By now, I'm sure you've heard that there are volcanic eruptions happening in Iceland. And you might be wondering, is it still safe to travel? Or should you postpone or cancel your trip? But here's the deal. Yes, there's an active volcano in Iceland, and it's erupted about 6 times in the past 6 months. And today, I'm going to tell you why. Hey, my name is Jeannie, and I've been exploring Iceland for the past 10 years. I've written guidebooks and itineraries that have more than 500 5-star reviews, and my mission is to help you plan the best trip ever. So let's get into it. So the first thing that we need to understand is, where is this volcano located? So the volcano is located on the Reykjanes Peninsula, aka the southwest corner of the country, about 20 kilometers or 12 miles from Keflavik International Airport, 50 kilometers or 30 miles from Reykjavik, and 3 kilometers or 2 miles from the Blue Lagoon. So yeah, it's close to things. I did reach out to my community on Instagram and asked what you guys want to know about the volcano, and one of the most common questions was, how is this volcano affecting the locals? This is a fantastic question, obviously. And here's the situation. By far, the most affected area is Grindavik, which is a small village of about 4,000 residents just south of the volcano eruptions. Unfortunately, this area has been devastated by the earthquakes and the lava spread from the volcanoes, to the point where it's not really safe for them to live in their homes anymore. The town has been devastated by earthquakes, with massive cracks opening up on the major roads and through homes, as well as one of the volcanoes produced lava that was so close to the town that unfortunately burned down some of the homes. I would say at this point, because it's been going on for so many months, most residents of the town have decided to relocate. However, there are some people that still want to live in their home. And so the residents are allowed to live in their homes as long as it's not during an active volcano eruption. So what they do is they have a siren system. So when the activity starts happening, they are meant to evacuate just for their own safety. Beyond that, the government has set up a program to buy homes from the residents of Grindavik. So if they want to relocate and they're essentially being forced out of their home, then they'll at least be compensated and able to relocate comfortably to another area. The other very important structure close by to the eruptions is a power plant, which at various times has been cut off from electricity and water supply to Grindavik, but also the neighboring towns as well. Obviously, the other structure very close to the volcano is the Blue Lagoon. And while most people know that this is a massive tourist destination, this is also the source of jobs for a lot of people. So a lot of workers in Iceland have been affected by not being able to go to work or being forced evacuated when an eruption does happen. In an effort to protect Grindavik, the power plant, and the Blue Lagoon, barriers have been built around the area to try to prevent the lava from flowing over into those areas and creating even more destruction than it already has. Some of those barriers have been more effective than others, and I think that it's a great strategy, at least for trying to maintain the safety and preserve the area. But of course, nature is going to do its thing. All right, so now that we know where the volcano is located, you're probably wondering how this affects you and your trip and all of the things. So here's the first and most important thing, and that is the airport. Keflavik International Airport, which is very close by to the volcanoes, is surprisingly unaffected by the eruptions. It's completely operational, and in fact, since these eruptions have been happening, none of the flights have been delayed or canceled as a result of the active volcanoes. So if you're worried about your flight being canceled or delayed or in and out, safety, things like that, you don't have to be. Sometimes you might actually get a bonus flyover on your way in, just depending on the pilot and the gas flow and all of the safety things considered. I have heard that some people are able to see the volcano from the air when flying in, so that could actually be a nice little bonus for you. In terms of tourism, the Reykjanes Peninsula has been obviously very affected by the lava flow. And this is mainly because they have to close certain roads because lava has flowed over it. Or perhaps the gas flow direction is unsafe, and so they're having to close major sections of road. And so accessing the Reykjanes Peninsula is not as easy as it used to be. Whereas this used to be an area that tourists would just skip and go to the rest of Iceland, and I would say, there's some beautiful sites on the Reykjanes Peninsula. I actually did a whole video about this. Now it's just not safe to have all of those roads open. So which roads will be open or closed completely depends on the earthquakes or the volcanic activity at the time that you're visiting. So I would always recommend to check road.is when you arrive, just so that you know which roads are open and accessible. And then obviously the Blue Lagoon. A lot of people are wondering if it's open, if they should make a reservation, or if it's even safe to be there. And the thing is, that is not my decision to make for you. I know that there are still some people who don't care that there's a volcano close by. They're gonna make their reservation, they're gonna go, they're gonna take that risk for themselves. Here's my advice for what it's worth: take it or leave it. If it were me, my advice is to skip the Blue Lagoon at this time. Yes, it's an iconic place to visit, but it's not the only hot spring in the country. And because it's so close to the fault line, some of the eruptions have been closer than others, resulting in evacuations at the last minute, even in the middle of the night. The thing is, the last thing I want is for you to have to worry about your safety or your family's safety while you're visiting. Again, that's just my recommendation. You have to make that choice for yourself. There's no right or wrong answer. The Blue Lagoon has been opening and closing as a result of the eruptions, and you'll have to keep up to date with what they suggest at the time of booking and the time of arrival for your visit. Other than that, you guys, it's so important to realize that this eruption is so located to a small area of Iceland, and the rest of the country is completely safe. And by that, I mean there's still so many amazing places that you can go visit safely, completely away from the volcano. So in terms of tourism and actually being able to access the country, the airport is open. In terms of safety, just don't go by the volcano. And I know it sounds dangerous because there's horror stories from maybe other countries or things that you have heard. It's just not like that in Iceland. And I wouldn't be saying that if I didn't fully believe that. Feel confident in still continuing to hold your reservations, visiting Iceland, just don't go in that area. All right, before I move on to the next tip, if you love getting helpful information like this and love to stay up to date about Iceland and want to learn what's happening around the country, make sure to click the link in the description box and sign up for my newsletter. Every week I send out a super helpful email with local updates, which are essential if you're planning a trip to Iceland. Now, let's get back to the volcano info. The next point that a lot of people wanted to know is how can they access the volcano? How can they see it safely, of course, but they want to see it for themselves, right? So here's the thing to know. This is not a tourist volcano. As of this recording, the current eruptions that are happening are not safe to access, which is very different from the eruptions that started back in 2021 through 2022, when there was a whole hike that was designed around the volcano, and a parking lot, toilets, food truck, and guided tours, and it was very accessible to get to that string of volcanoes. This one is so different because it's closer to all that infrastructure, and the lava flow has been massive and it's spreading really quickly, and it's just much more dangerous with the location that this one is in. So again, this is June 2024. If you're planning on coming to Iceland with the intention to try and access this volcano, that's the wrong approach. They're taking massive precautions to close down the roads, law enforcement telling you that you can't access the area. Absolutely no drones are allowed. If you've seen people on social media that are flying their drones and getting these really close pictures, it's because they have media passes. These are not your average run-of-the-mill people that are just putting stuff up for social media. So like I said, the main roads kind of surrounding the volcano will be completely closed off to any traffic during active lava flow. Of course, anyone in the area is curious, so locals and tourists will kind of congregate at the intersection of 41 and 43 where the roads meet. There's a little roundabout. They'll park their vehicles and then kind of walk to this little hill area where it is possible to see the eruption happening from a very far. But especially when that first activity happens and the lava fountains can be quite big into the air, then you're going to be able to see this activity. You're going to see the gas into the sky. So in that case, it is possible to watch it from afar. But in terms of getting up close, hiking to it, getting those great photos, that's not available. One thing that is pretty amazing is that the road to the Blue Lagoon and Grindavik that tend to be overtaken by lava, they'll go through and plow through that lava. After the eruption has calmed down and the lava has had a chance to not be melting, and what they do is they put gravel over that section of the road so that you can now drive to your home in Grindavik, or you could drive to the Blue Lagoon that way. And in that case, again, when the volcano is not erupting, that is an opportunity where tourists can drive down that road, see all the new lava field, kind of park, get out, walk around, check it out a little bit. Definitely don't walk on the lava. It's still not safe to walk on lava, but it is a really interesting opportunity to see fresh earth that was just created recently. But again, that hike that I was referring to, where you could hike to the crater before, that's completely closed off now. That's just because that whole entire road is a threat to lava overtaking it. So that area isn't even accessible anymore. Therefore, the only way to see the active volcano erupting at this point is to take a helicopter tour. Not a bad way to see an active volcano, if you ask me. I have done it myself. It was absolutely amazing to see that. And if you're interested, I'll leave a link in the description box so that you can check out how to book a helicopter tour over the volcano. So let's back up a little bit and talk about how these volcanoes even happen. Like, what's the deal? And as a gigantic disclaimer, obviously, I'm not a geologist, a volcanologist. I know very, very little about this topic. But since this has been going on in Iceland for 3 years, I am starting to get more of an understanding, and I follow a lot of really smart people, scientists, people that know their stuff. And so this is basically me regurgitating the information to you or condensing it down in layman's terms. So very importantly is there are over 100 volcanoes in Iceland, if you didn't already know that. The Reykjanes Peninsula, in terms of the recent eruptions, has a fault line that runs straight through it, which is why this is prime target territory for all this volcanic activity. But for hundreds of years, this fault line in this volcanic region was inactive. It was sleeping. It was dormant. And by activity, I mean the first warning sign of a pending eruption is earthquakes. And they could be small little quakes, and they could be bigger, massive quakes that are felt for quite some distance. Really, without trying to bore you, these earthquakes are different than, I'm going to use the US as an example by comparison, as the earthquakes in California. And that is because the tectonic plates move apart in Iceland rather than together. So if you've ever seen photos of a California earthquake where, it seems like it was smushed up together, and that's very different than earthquakes that happen in Iceland. So the plates are moving apart in Iceland. So you're seeing the earth is actually pulled open. There will be hundreds and hundreds of tiny little earthquakes that will happen until almost that eruption happens, and they're getting stronger and stronger. So we're having about a 5 magnitude earthquake that can definitely be felt into the capital where a lot more people live. Yes, I have felt several earthquakes, and yes, they're just crazy to experience. Anyway, so this will happen sometimes over the period of a week, a few weeks, and more recently with these eruptions, it's like the earthquakes can just be happening and then all of a sudden give maybe only 45 minutes of warning. And to me, that's what makes this volcanic system a little bit different and more scary, is because it is closer to infrastructure and it's giving such little warning that in order to get out and evacuate seems much more dangerous to me. So basically, the magma is accumulating underneath the ground, which is creating all these earthquakes. And then all of a sudden, enough pressure builds up and up and up and up, and the lava has to go somewhere. And that's when we see the eruption happening. In this particular location, it's causing what's called a fissure eruption, which is basically the earth opens up like a seam. So if you've seen photos or videos of this stream of lava fountains that are happening over a kilometer or so, that's what that is. And so it's during this time when the earth first opens up that most of the lava is escaping out. And it's causing, you know, all these huge fountains to go up and a lot of lava spread. And this is just definitely the most powerful and dangerous time of the activity. And that's why they're closing down the roads and evacuating the town and evacuating the Blue Lagoon. However, over time, after some of the magma has escaped underground, then the lava actually condenses into maybe a few or one main vent. And so that's where you can kind of see that cone build up. So the cone is actually forming because the lava is condensing to one area and it's creating this crater that the lava is coming out of. Again, not a scientist. Don't hold me to any of this. It's just my understanding up to this point and experience after all these years. Moving on to another question that I got over and over again, and that is, when is it gonna stop? And I think that goes two different ways, meaning like, when is this activity going to stop? And when is this volcano gonna stop? You know, can I come on my trip? Because I don't want the volcano happening while I'm on my trip. There's two different mindsets for this. And the first thing is to say, again, not a scientist. My understanding is that these volcanic systems will become inactive or dormant for thousands of years. In the event of the Reykjanes eruptions, this has been the case. There's inhabited life, there's infrastructure, you know, everyone's just thinking like, this is where we're living. As of recently, this system has woken up. That just means that we're currently in an indefinite period of volcanic eruptions. And as you've seen, this is kind of something that's going on and off. But when the system is woken up, this can be going on for years. And no one really knows when it's going to stop. So I guess you could say this is the new normal. And other than the residents of Grindavik, that's exactly how Icelanders see it. This is just life now. We live on a volcanic island. You know, volcanoes happen, eruptions happen, earthquakes are part of life. And of course, they're doing everything to ensure the citizens are safe, but other than that, there's nothing else that they can do. Again, as of the time of this recording, this current volcanic system that's happening seems to have some predictability in terms of they're watching, you know, there's kind of like this inflation that's happening and this buildup of magma underground, and they can tell, okay, now it's getting really close. Now it could be within a week. Now it could be within a couple of hours. So they're really starting to see patterns and monitoring it. But in terms of when the actual volcano erupts, it could last anywhere from 2 days up to 2 months. And I think the takeaway here is we're talking about nature. It's super unpredictable. It's going to do what it's going to do, and there's nothing that we can do to stop it. But you guys, that's what brings me to my last point. All in all, I would hate to see you cancel or postpone your trip because you don't have to. As a tourist, the volcano likely won't affect you at all. For those of you that are planning a trip, don't let these events steer you away from visiting the country. As I just said, life in Iceland continues to go on as normal even when these volcanoes are erupting. The main takeaway is just stay away from it, and then the rest of Iceland is your oyster. We don't know when this volcano is going to stop erupting. But in the meantime, the rest of the country is completely safe and ready to be explored. Now that you've learned how to visit Iceland, even when a volcano is erupting, the next step is to learn what to do on day one when you arrive in Iceland. Watch this video next where I teach you how to make everything as easy as possible from the minute you step off the plane. I'll see you in the next video, but until then, happy planning.